plan that before we begin, I wanted to invite you all into a place of honesty with yourselves. I want you to think for a moment about what you're carrying and what you're holding on to this morning. And can you visualize it? And how are you holding it? Is it in your hands? Is it larger? Is it in your arms? Or is it on your back? And how heavy is it? I want you, to the best of your ability, to just set it down for at least the next 20, 25 minutes and just listen to this story. She comes here every day at this time. And it's the worst time of day to come because it's noon and the sun seems to be working overtime and scorch the land and its inhabitants. And it's a time of day when most people hide away in the cooler temperatures of their homes. It's a time they enjoy lunch and a break from the day's labor because you'd have to be almost insane to stay out here in the heat at this time of the day. But this is the time of day that ends up being her favorite part of the day because it's the one time in her day where she can come out to the community well and find some solitude. And she's not just looking for peace and quiet, although it's nice. She's really just glad that she doesn't run into anyone out here because they've already gathered their water, or maybe they will later in the day. Because at least this way, she doesn't have to exchange pleasantries, knowing that they're all fake anyways. And she knows she's one of the community's favorite gossip topics. And she's an easy target given her past, as well as her ongoing relationship status. And if any of the ladies in town ever needed to feel better about their situation, they could always rely on a snide remark about her to lift themselves up and above at least one person. But no one knows her story better than her. The people seem to think they know all the details, but we all know that details don't really matter so long as the community has someone they can pick on, someone they can keep on the bottom rung of their tight little community caste system. It's funny, no one's ever actually asked her about the details of her situation. She's been married 5 times and had as many divorces. And sure, in this case, she seems to be the common denominator, but let's be honest, the men aren't faultless either. And one thing is for sure, she has wrestled with a certain restlessness for as long as she can remember. And she's placed a lot of hope in the next relationship. A hope that this will last, or this relationship will turn things around and it'll give her whatever she's looking for. But so far, none of them have fulfilled her hopes and her dreams. And maybe this new guy will. Who knows? He seems nice. And then one day, a particularly hot day, she makes her way to the well in the midday heat. And she notices that there's someone else there. No one else is ever here, she thinks to herself. And a little annoyed that she's going to have to make small talk this afternoon, as she comes closer to the well, she realizes that the person is sitting down at the well, and they're not drawing water, they're just sitting there. And she can see this figure, this man. She can see that he's exhausted and he's taking a much needed break from the oppressive heat that day. And she can see the toll the heat has taken on him. She can see it in the sweat on his face and the way his shoulders are slumped as he leans sideways against the well. And then as she comes close enough, just a few feet away, she notices his clothing and she sees the blue and the white stripes with the tassels that hang off of the corners. And her spidey sense tingles, and she thinks, Jew, rabbi, great. What's he doing here? Because Samaria is not on TripAdvisor's top 10 list, and it's not a place where a Jew, let alone a rabbi, would stop and spend the afternoon in. Can you give me something to drink? He asks. And she thinks, did this Jew, this rabbi no less, just ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? Is this some kind of joke? And she hopes for his sake that no one else comes out here and sees a person of his status with someone like her. Feeling a little awkward at his request, she responds, not entirely with a yes or a no, but certainly a reminder of the boundary these two are supposed to uphold. You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How is it that you're asking me for a drink? Had the heat gone to his head? Is he thinking clearly? This is not normal, and it makes her admittedly a little suspicious. So she does two things in particular with this response. First, she's trying to preserve his dignity and wants to remind him who and what she is. She's been conditioned to do so since as long as she can remember, that this kind of interaction won't be tolerated. The second thing she's trying to do here is simply end the conversation. His response is peculiar. He says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Oh, so now we're going to have a theological conversation at the well? Who is this guy? Sir, all due respect, you don't even have a bucket to draw water with. How are you going to give me something to drink? And then she turns the sass knob from about 5 to 9, and she says, excuse me, are you greater than our father Jacob, the one who gave us this well and drank from it himself? Seriously, who does this guy think he is? And that's when they start to have some fun. And Jesus flips it back to her, and he says, look, everyone who comes to this well and everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. Point for Captain Obvious. Then he says something pretty remarkable. He says, but whoever drinks the water I give will never thirst, because the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. It's a pretty good sales pitch. And her response is almost perfect. She says, sir, give me this water. Give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and I don't have to keep coming here to draw water. And although she's not quite sure she fully understands what he's getting at, she heard she'll never thirst again, and that sounds pretty good. Because if she never thirsts again, she won't have to keep coming back to this well. She won't have to keep coming back here at this ungodly hot hour every day, avoiding people in her community because of the shame and the guilt she carries because of her life choices. What she's interested in really is a way out of this routine, and she'll have to continue for the rest of her days. She's interested in a way to avoid people and the consequences of her situation altogether. She's interested in a way out. Have you ever lived a recurring situation you just wanted to be rid of? A situation you wish would just go away and you could finally be free from? Maybe it was or is a situation of your own doing, and maybe it's just a situation that you simply find yourself in. Because life. Either way, you know what it feels like to want to be free and rid of what's uneasy and uncomfortable. Because what she hears is not just a vacation from her problems, but a solution. And here she thought this interaction with this Jewish rabbi was going to be awkward. All of a sudden, it is. And he says, go get your husband and bring him back here with you. She's quick to reply, well, I don't have a husband. And thinking that was going to be the end of it, until he responds by saying, you're right. You're right when you say you have no husband, because the truth is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. And so from her perspective, can you imagine how dumbfounded she must have felt? How on earth does he know that? That's awfully specific. Like, who did he talk to? But from his perspective, from Jesus' perspective, he's inviting her in. He's inviting her into the truth. And there's no judgment here. He's just revealed to her a truth about herself, a truth that has been, up to this point, all-consuming. It's literally altered the way she interacts with her community. And he names to her what's really, I think, going on inside of her. What Jesus is getting at is, like, you tried all these different ways, these men in particular, to make you happy, to make you feel complete, but these relationships, they're not working out for you. In fact, each one has likely made you feel more incomplete than the last. And you're on potential husband number 6. Are you so sure this one will fulfill you? What Jesus is naming is her longing for relationship and her desire to be loved and known. And at the same time, he's not telling her to leave her current boyfriend. He never says that. But perhaps stop thinking this relationship is going to solve all of your problems. And this is where the conversation takes a turn. Like many of us would do, she begins to deflect. She says, sir, I can see that you're a prophet. And our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place that we all must worship is in Jerusalem. Now, this response may seem like it came out of nowhere. It doesn't really belong in this context. But here's where the deflection comes in. She's pulling away from him. And she's pulling away from him by reminding him again of the difference between her people, the Samaritans, and his people, the Jews. Her defense mechanisms are going up, and she begins to build this wall and begin to drive a wedge between herself and him, and she looks for a way out of this conversation. She thought he was offering her a solution from her problems, and a quick solution at that. She wasn't ready to deal with the issues she faced. She was not ready for so much honesty about herself. But sometimes it just feels easier to keep living the reality we face, even if it's not the healthiest option, doesn't it? We've all had situations like that, haven't we? So honesty is hard. It's hard sometimes because it's not just telling the truth, it's owning the truth, and it's owning our part of it. It's owning up to the fact that something needs to change. And it's a very vulnerable thing to do. Healthy and it's freeing, but it can feel like an insurmountable obstacle at first. As Jesus' response, he pushes up against the wall she's trying to put up. And he says, look, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. Saying essentially, one day, we'll all be one. These boundaries, these lines we've drawn, they won't exist. And he continues from her comment. He says, you Samaritans, actually, you worship what you don't know, and we worship what we do know. So what sounds like this religious debate that's bubbling up is Jesus pressing into what makes these two groups different from one another. As the Samaritans read only from the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament, while the Jews also read from the prophets, these prophets who play a significant role in naming the prophecy of the Messiah. And this is what Jesus is getting at here. He's setting himself up for this big reveal. And he continues and he says, salvation is from the Jews. And he says that because the Messiah, the Christ, the saving one, the one who was to come, is from Jewish lineage. Now, honestly, this is probably the last conversation she thought she'd have when she headed for the well that afternoon. And then this happens. She says, I know the Messiah is coming, and when he comes, look, he'll explain everything to us. One last deflection here. She says to Jesus, look, the Messiah will sort everything out in the end, and I really don't have time to sort it out with you. Can you tell she's just done? And then Jesus lays this out. He says, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. I am the one. This is the Messiah. And that's when everything changes. For her, that's when the curtain drops. And she had been living a life where her situation was on full display to her community. And it was both exposing and isolating. But when she realizes that it's Jesus, the Messiah, the one who saves, the one who names what she's going through, even though he reveals the truth to her, which is vulnerable, somehow she's no longer exposed. It reminds me of the part in the creation story where Adam and Eve realize their nakedness and their shame in it, and so they hide. And what's God's response? God makes clothes for them. God responds to their vulnerability. And it's at this moment in the story the woman takes off. She heads back into her town and leaves her water pitcher behind. Did you catch that? She leaves behind her water pitcher. Isn't that symbolic? When she originally came to receive that afternoon, she realizes she no longer has a need for it. She was being offered something more than the people and the things she was trying to find true fulfillment and meaning in. And she came to grips with the fact that they weren't working. She met Jesus in a rather unexpected way and is offered something truly sustainable. She had been coming to this well every day for who knows how long. And it ended up being about way more than water, didn't it? And her coming to this well every day at this time was about avoidance and shame, and it became larger than it needed to be. And this part of her story became who she was. But Jesus had other plans for her. What she came for, she suddenly no longer needed. What she was carrying, she was able to finally set down. And what she was avoiding and hiding from, she now felt comfortable owning it. And not just comfortable, but a freedom. This is that whole the truth shall set you free thing. This is how it looks. And she runs into the town shouting, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did, which I know you all know about. Could this be the Messiah? Living into her newfound freedom, she runs into town to all of the people she was used to avoiding. And she says, you have to come with me and meet this man who told me everything about my story. I seriously think he might be the one. She had found that so freeing. She just had to tell people. She was so free that she no longer cared that everyone knew her business. She was too busy living into grace. She didn't care. That morning, she woke up a troubled woman, living a reality that had weighed her down and held her captive for years. And by lunch, she was free. She was seen and heard, and when someone who happened to be Jesus, God in the flesh, named her story, named her truth, he didn't run. He didn't run and he didn't judge, and he just extended an invitation to live differently, an invitation for her to own her story and a chance to live a different story, an opportunity to experience abundant life, life to the fullest. So let me ask you this. What are you carrying up the hill to the well this morning? How heavy is that burden? What is it that you're afraid to be honest about? I want you to know that, like this woman, Jesus is sitting at the well, waiting for you, ready to listen, ready to name truth with you, ready to extend not only grace and understanding, but a way forward too. A way forward where you are not your worst day, where what you're not proud of no longer has you believing that this is who you are and that you can never change. The life to the fullest requires honesty to the fullest. And if you're ready for that, you're welcome to leave your water pitcher at the well with Jesus this morning. I want to leave you this morning with these words from Henry Nouwen. He says, in solitude, we discover that we are not what we do, but what we are given. And that we are not the result of our judgments, but born out of God's love. Let me offer a word of prayer. Jesus, thank you that you wait for us, that you anticipate our walking to the well, carrying whatever we have in our arms. And that you are the great revealer. That God, you are light, you are truth, and that's what you speak. And when we're honest with ourselves and when we can be vulnerable with you, you reveal that truth back to us. God, thank you that it doesn't bring more heaviness or judgment, but it brings freedom, that it brings grace, and that it alters our course, a direction. It can change how we live. God, forgive us for hanging on to it a little too tightly. Just accepting that this is the reality and nothing will change it. Give us the courage and the trust to approach you at the well, to name our story, and to be set free. Amen.